Hey folks, Eric Stacklebeck here. Welcome to another Watchman Newscast live stream. Wednesday, March 22nd, we are in the height of March Madness, one of my favorite times of the year as a basketball fan. So I'm following that closely, but of course I'm following the Middle East and everything going around the world, China, Russia, beyond here in the United States, even more closely, of course. It's nice to have a diversion a little bit sometimes, right? And just watch a game and relax a little bit sometimes and take your mind off everything that's going on because there is a lot going on. Let's dig into it. March Madness, April, May, June Madness. That's what it's been in the Middle East. And what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. It profoundly affects all of us, no matter where we live around the world. We have some major breaking news. Now, we've had a lot of comments on this topic over the past few days. Prime Minister Netanyahu came out today in strong support of the Christian community in Israel and said no legislation targeting Christians will pass in Israel's Knesset. I'm not surprised by that in the least. We're going to break that down in a minute. It's great news. I knew the prime minister would come through on this issue. I know his just great feelings for the Christian community in Israel and around the world. I've heard it from him firsthand in interviewing him and asking him about it. So we're going to break that down. Big news, folks. Very positive news. Also, more Israeli airstrikes in Syria targeting Aleppo International Airport. Now, this is the second strike on Aleppo International Airport in the past 2 weeks alone. Why? Why now? Is this leading to something bigger? We'll break that down as well. And we have covered this attempted terror attack in northern Israel last week at Megiddo Junction. It looks very likely that a Hezbollah operative was behind that attempted attack. Now, one Israeli was seriously injured in that attack. Keep him in prayer, folks. A 21-year-old Israeli Arab citizen in his car was some of the effects of that blast hit his car and injured him severely. So please keep this young man in prayer. I don't have his name with me now, but absolutely pray for him. It could have been a much bigger disaster, of course, as we've discussed here in the newscast. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, this is our breaking news element to this today. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, is now seems to be gloating about this attempted terror attack. What did he say? Why is that so important? As we discussed yesterday, will Israel retaliate for that? So needless to say, we've got a lot going on. We've got some more tension on the Israel-Jordan front as well, folks. I've expressed concerns about that here in the newscast, what's been happening in the Israel-Jordan relationship. A lot of it revolves around the Temple Mount, but there's more to it than that. We've got a new development there as well. Hey, we go for a full hour on our live streams. And as you can tell, there's never a shortage of topics to talk about here on the Watchman Newscast live stream. Now, if you are just joining us, you've never tuned into the Watchman before. If you're here, I assume that you probably are a subscriber and a regular viewer. But if not, we do these live streams once a week, usually on Wednesdays, between 4 and 5 p.m. Eastern time. This is an opportunity for us to go a full hour, and I will be taking your questions at the end of this live stream for our Q&A session. About the last 15 minutes or so, we'll take your questions, so be sure to send some good ones along. And we do the newscast on a regular basis, live stream once a week, but every day a commentary, a brand new commentary posted here on the Watchman YouTube channel between Monday and Friday. And also on the weekend, either on Saturday or Sunday, we will post a clip, a commentary as well. And now we've got these YouTube shorts. Not sure if you guys have seen this, if you're following what's going on in YouTube. More and more of these short clips are under a minute long. They're really catching on, and we're turning a bunch of those out as well here at the Watchman. So our team is very busy. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe and click the notification bell. Give us a big thumbs up. We want you to get alerts every time a new video is posted. Folks, it's hard to believe. We are creeping up on 600,000 subscribers. Seems like we just passed 500,000, 500,000. That was not too long ago. So things are rapidly moving for such a time as this. And we're just grateful to all of you for being shoulder to shoulder with us as watchmen and women on the wall. And above all, we're grateful to God Almighty for giving us this platform in these Bible times in which we live. Okay, let me check in real quick before we get into the big story, Bibi and Israel's Christians and the ramifications of that. Real quick, just to give everyone a shout out watching around the world. Europe, Africa, I see already, Israel, the United States. So this is great. We've got people from around the world, as always. And before we are done, we will have thousands of people here live together from every corner of the world. Pretty exciting, right? That we have the capability today to do that. Over the past few days, as I mentioned at the top, there have been a lot of very valid concerns expressed in our comments. I wanted to wait to address this. Concerns about proposed legislation by two ultra-Orthodox Israeli Knesset members. I'm going to break down the particulars of it. My good friend Joel Rosenberg, a friend and colleague at TBN, he hosts the Rosenberg Report at TBN. We air on the same night, Thursday nights. That's kind of our Israel block on TBN. The Watchman TV show at 10 p.m. Eastern, and Joel's show, the Rosenberg Report, at 9 p.m. Eastern. Joel is American originally, but he lives in Jerusalem now. Again, a dear friend of mine, a colleague. He broke the news on Sunday on his website, All Israel News. I believe it's allisrael.com. Great site that you should follow. That two members of Israel's Knesset, again, ultra-Orthodox, I have their names here. I'm going to pull it up, just read it to you off of my phone. I will quote directly from Joel's great piece about this. And don't worry, it has, for now, what seems to be a very positive ending. But in the meantime, here's the background on it. The two Knesset members proposed legislation to outlaw sharing the gospel in Israel, and it would even send violators to prison. Could this become law? Joel asked on Sunday. That was March 19th. And again, we have an update for you today. I'll get to in a minute, but I want to give you the backdrop. If you don't know this story, bear with me. Joel asks, is it possible that the Israeli government this year could pass legislation making it illegal for people to share the gospel message in the very land where Jesus was born, raised, preached, died, buried, and rose from the dead? He says, unfortunately, yes. Two members of the Knesset, that's Israel's parliament, introduced a bill last week that would ban any and all efforts to tell people about Jesus. The bill would send violators to prison. Right away, I knew that Netanyahu would have something to say about this, and he did. But Joel breaks it down some more. Let's see the players behind this. It was two lawmakers. I apologize. I'm just grabbing their names. Moshe Gafni and Yaakov Asher are ultra-Orthodox Jewish members of the Knesset. Both are members of United Torah Judaism. That's a part of the ruling coalition in Israel right now. They have 7 out of the 120 seats in the current Israeli Knesset. So it's not a massive party by any stretch of the imagination, but they are part of the current ruling coalition. Remember, you have to reach that magic number, 62 seats or 61 seats in the Knesset, and Netanyahu needed those 7 seats from that party to form a coalition. And they tried to pass this legislation, or they put it forward. Again, to put this in perspective, number one of these Knesset members, Moshe Gafni, first put forward this legislation way back in 1999. It didn't go anywhere then. It didn't go anywhere now. To give some more clarification, I've seen anti-Semites seize on this, and anti-Israel types seize on this in our comments over the past few days, saying, see, the Christ killers in Israel, they hate Christians, they hate followers of Jesus, they want to lock us up. Again, these are two members of the Knesset who are really fringe, and one of them put forward this legislation in 1999 for the first time. He puts it forward again 24 years later. It went nowhere then, and it went nowhere now, because the vast majority of Israel's Knesset members do not want to see this. They support religious freedom in Israel. Hey, walk around Jerusalem, folks, like I do on a frequent basis. You see everyone there, okay? Jews, Christians, Muslims, side by side. There's synagogues, there's churches, there's mosques. They're all there. So when it comes to religious freedom in the Middle East in particular, Israel is the top of the top. Yet there are some, particularly in the ultra-Orthodox community, who feel this way. and who would like to see this legislation go through. This is not a broad feeling in Israel. And you saw Prime Minister Netanyahu put a stop to it today. He said, this isn't going to go through. Now, a little bit more backdrop on there. When Joel Rosenberg's article came out on Sunday, right away, Christian leaders in the United States who are friends of Israel, like Jack Graham, like Greg Laurie, who are great friends of Israel and who are well respected here in the U.S. among the Christian community, they said, hey, wait a minute. The Israel we know and love stands for religious freedom. And as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we always feel comfortable in Israel. And you know, if we want to share our faith with someone, we can. And Netanyahu's team, according to friends of mine who are in touch with them on this issue, Benjamin Netanyahu's team was following all this very closely, and they were in contact with Christian leaders in the U.S. about this, and they said, this is never going to pass. Don't worry, we've got this. These are two fringe members of the Knesset, and indeed, folks, we got the confirmation today of that. I knew it was coming. That's why I waited. I've been speaking to people on back channels on this and getting the scoop from people on the ground in Israel who are in contact with the Prime Minister's team. I said, okay, the perfect time to talk about this and really unpack it is during a live stream. We've got a full hour to go here, right? So Netanyahu today, and Joel followed up on his scoop on Sunday. He tweets out very simple: we will not advance any law against the Christian community. You can check out Prime Minister Netanyahu's Twitter account there. And he says it there again, folks. We will not advance any law against the Christian community. I think he didn't expand on that more because he just thinks it's ludicrous. Netanyahu himself, and I know this from interviewing him, he says, look, I've done more to stand with the Christian community and show my appreciation, my gratitude to the Christian community in the United States and around the world more than anyone. And he has deep relationships, does Bibi, with Christian leaders around the world. And I have to say, when I interviewed him back in December, and you saw it here in the newscast on the Watchmen TV show, I interviewed him for 35 minutes. We were supposed to get 25. He was kind enough to give us an extra 10 minutes. And I asked him about his great relationship with the Christian community, which goes back decades. And Netanyahu really expounded on that. If you missed that, I encourage you to go back and look at my interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu. It aired in December. You can find it here in our archives. I believe we even have a category, the best of Benjamin Netanyahu, here on the homepage on our channel. You can find it there. But he really expounded on that, folks, in a way that really impressed me. Number one, he spoke from the heart. He has sincere love and affection for the Christian community and sincere gratitude for how Christians stand with Israel through thick and thin. That's number one. But number two, even more impressive to me, he knows the history of this relationship. Christian Zionism and followers of Jesus standing with the land of Israel, with God's land. It's not a recent development, folks. This didn't just start in the 1980s or the 1990s. Really, in the modern day, really the growth of not just Christian Zionism, but Zionism in general. Really, Great Britain was a hub for it. The evangelical Christian community in Great Britain in the 19th century, a groundswell really built up there, calling for a return to Zion, for the rebirth of the Jewish state, and for the Jewish people to go back to their rightful land, their ancient and ancestral homeland once again. And Bibi realizes that. And we talked about that during our interview. It was fascinating. And I appreciated it as a Christian to know that he, the Prime Minister of Israel, a Jew, fully understood the Christian role and how Christians stood alongside the Jewish people in the 19th century as they looked to return to Zion and reestablish the land of Israel. And Bibi, at length, he named the names who were involved, and he knew the history. So that really impressed me. So that gives you a sense that this is just not a fly-by-night thing for him, where he says, well, it's great, the Christians support us, great. And I mean, some are like that, but Bibi, no. This is genuine to the point where he has read, he's studied the history of this relationship. There's a deep sincerity and appreciation on his part when it comes to Christians in the United States and around the world. Israel has been, and for me, I'm a follower of Jesus. I've been to Israel dozens of times. You know, I go several times per year for the Watchmen filming, meeting with folks. And folks, I've never felt hostility, and I'm a Christian. Jesus is my Lord and Savior. He's a Savior of the world. I'm very open about it. Everyone there knows exactly where I stand. And no one has shunned me or made me feel unwelcome, even in places where you would think, even in places where there's not any Christians around or any followers of Jesus around, I've been welcomed. And I've had conversations with folks, very interesting conversations. So Israel, for me, is a place, as a Christian, I've always felt free to be who I am, to be a follower of Jesus openly, and to express that. And I've never felt anything but welcome. And I think most Christians who travel to Israel have that experience when they walk where Jesus walked, and great interactions with the people of Israel who are full of life and joy, who are just a joyous people. There's no coincidence that a recent study, take it for what it's worth, it's a UN commission study apparently, but nevertheless, Israel was ranked for the year 2022 the fourth happiest country in the world. The United States, by the way, was number 15. Number one was Finland. I think Finland, followed, I believe, by Denmark and Iceland. So interesting, but Israel number 4. Now, granted, that was before the recent unrest and the judicial overhaul protests. Maybe that number would be different now, but these numbers were taken before that, I believe over a 2 or 3 year period. Israel came in at number 4. That gives you an idea of what you are going to feel when you go to Israel. I felt nothing but open arms. Even before I wasn't a TV personality who stands with Israel, my first few times to Israel, I wasn't quote unquote known or had a huge following or anything like that. And still, hey, you're a Christian? Great. I'm a Jew? Great. Okay. Go live your life. Enjoy being here. Welcome to Israel. That was the attitude. So again, I can't stress enough that this is not a widespread feeling in Israel. There wasn't a groundswell supporting this legislation. Quite the opposite. Members of the Knesset were disgusted by it. That's why, again, it's been put forth several times by the same guy for decades, and it's never gone anywhere, folks. So to put that in perspective, we really, really need to clear this up because, again, I had the anti-Semites and the anti-Israel types here on the channel saying, see, they hate Christians. Their term, they're Christ killers, right? The old anti-Semitic canard, as if Romans didn't drive the nail through, as if Jesus didn't die for all of our sins. But I digress. But you saw that, and I said, here you go. This guy is giving fodder. I know he didn't intend that, this Knesset member, as wrong, as misguided as he was on this. I know he didn't intend to give fodder to anti-Semites and the anti-Israel crowd, but sadly, that's exactly what he did. And they said, this confirms what we've been saying. The Jews are intolerant, Israelis are intolerant, et cetera, et cetera. So thankfully, Bibi came out today and he said, no, this ain't happening. We're not going to target the Christian community in Israel who are vibrant members of the fabric of Israeli society. It's not happening. So hopefully that nips this in the bud. Will this member of Knesset, these two ultra-Orthodox members, try to bring it up sometime in the future once again? Perhaps they will. Again, they brought it up several times, or at least a handful of times since 1999. But folks, this will end in the same way that it did this time around. And it won't go anywhere. So know that as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, you are welcome in Israel. And you will not feel like an outsider, an outcast. Actually, as someone who follows Jesus, Yeshua, who was an Israeli from the Galilee region of Israel, I have felt like it's coming home when I go to Israel. And I know many people feel like that as well. And not just because I've been there dozens of times. And I do consider Jerusalem my second home. I know those streets as well as I know some streets in the United States. The very first time I set foot in Israel, way back in November 2008, I felt like I'd been there before. As a Christian, as a believer, I felt like I'd been there before. So let me tell you, Israel is a life-changing experience. And I gave a speech last week. Spring is a busy time. People start having speaking engagements, and I gave a talk at a large church last week, and this church, a group was going to Israel. And for many, it was their very first time, a tourism kind of group going soon. And I personally said, I don't know what's going on in your life right now, but I can speak to you right now, folks. Many times when I've had in my life, maybe some tumultuous things going on, or, something kind of stressful going on, or let's say this, I'm at a fork in the road in my life and there's a big decision that needs to be made. I'm telling you, it seems many times when that happens, invariably, I look at my calendar, I say, oh gosh, I'm going to Israel in 3 days. And my gut reaction at first oftentimes is, oh, I got this thing kind of weighing on me, this certain issue, this decision, whatever that I have to make. Gosh, and now I got to go to another country for 8 days, 9 days. And oh man, and this is going to be weighing on me. And I need to deal with this here before I leave. And that kind of mentality. But folks, let me tell you, God knows what he's doing. There's been several times, again, where he's just dropped me in Israel for a week in the middle of a storm, even where, again, there's a big decision or there's something going on. And folks, I'll tell you, time after time, I get to Israel, I'm there, and by the time I come back, I land back in the United States, I have a complete peace, complete and total shalom, peace. God takes me there for a reason. And not only that, clarity. It's just like the fog lifts. You're sitting in Jerusalem, you're staring out at the Temple Mount where Jesus once taught, where he chased out the money changers, where the temples once stood. You're in God's city, the city where he's written his name, the city of Jerusalem, Israel's ancient and ancestral capital. They say God is a local call in Jerusalem, and you feel the presence of God in a mighty, mighty way. And we are sitting in Jerusalem, just kind of meditating on the Lord and hashing it through and talking to God and just sitting in silence and listening for his small, still voice. There's nothing like it. So I come back with clarity, discernment, and peace. And I just had a friend who was kind of in a similar situation, who recently went to Israel as well. And he had a big decision to make. And I said, do you really think it's a coincidence that you're in Israel right now when this decision is looming? God is going to give you clarity and vision while you're in Israel. And I said this to this tour group at the church last week. And for several of them, again, it was going to be their first visit to Israel. I said, no one goes to Israel by accident. I can't wait to see what God does in your life when you're there. It might not be an epiphany or a great breakthrough for a major life decision or anything like that, but God will move in your life and he'll move in your heart while you are in his land. I can assure you of that. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you're an ambassador for Christ wherever you go around the world. Don't for a second think that Israel is a hostile place for you. Do Messianic believers in Israel, Jewish believers, Israeli believers, do they have issues at times? Yes, no doubt. In particular, with the ultra-Orthodox community. These two members of the ultra-Orthodox community were behind this bill, this proposed legislation in the Knesset that, again, went nowhere. So yes, is there hostility by some segments of the ultra-Orthodox community against Messianic believers? Without a doubt, that does exist. But I can tell you from working with Messianic believers in Israel, they are more and more accepted in Israel as they're just another branch of Israelis. You have Israelis who are ultra-Orthodox, modern Orthodox, Reform, conservative Jews. You have Arabs, you have Muslims in Israel, and Messianic Jews increasingly are seen as just another part of the fabric of Israeli society. And they've come a long way, needless to say, from decades ago. So positive reports on this end, from being on the ground in Israel, from being alongside the body of Christ there, Gentile and Jewish believers there. Positive reports on this end from my personal firsthand experience on what I've seen, what I've experienced, and in all of my interactions for believers in the land. I know it ain't perfect. It isn't anywhere, but when it comes to the Middle East especially, Israel's the best thing going. And last note here, the Christian community in Israel is growing. Look at the numbers at a rapid clip. It's the only Christian community in the Middle East that's growing. Everywhere else, the Christian community is mostly declining in the Middle East. So I'm glad we talked about that. I know we have a good give and take going here on the chat. As long as it's respectful, that's all I ask. No trolling. We called a troll out last week on the live stream because, again, you guys deserve better than that. You're taking an hour with me and with the group here to have a good conversation, an edifying conversation. So we want to keep it that way. No knuckleheads, as we would say in Philly, where I grew up. So I'm glad we got to straighten that out. Again, very positive news. Benjamin Netanyahu coming out in support of the Christian community. Again, kudos to Joel Rosenberg, my good buddy, for really pushing this and getting this story out there. And I have to say, putting a little bit of pressure on the prime minister and the Israeli government and saying, hey, you need to speak out on this. And to his credit, Prime Minister Netanyahu did just that. So as a Christian, I feel like we have a friend in the prime minister's chair in Jerusalem, in Israel. And that's a great thing, I believe. So in the meantime, there are these protests continuing in the streets of Israel over the judicial overhaul. Who knows where that's going? Will the coalition stay together? I believe it will. Expect the unexpected in Israel today, or in the Middle East in general, in the world in general. We have tumult everywhere around the world, it seems. But this coalition, it was a hard-fought victory. They are, for the most part, ideologically aligned. So let's see what happens. And Bibi, I just find it hard to believe that it's just a coincidence that he became prime minister once again, and the government's going to collapse within a few months and he's out of there. I tend to think more that he is the man for this time. He is the man in terms of confronting Iran's nuclear program. I see him as a Churchillian figure. I think of Winston Churchill, who saw the gathering storm of Nazi Germany. He knew what to do about it, despite tremendous opposition, including from his own parliament. Bibi, for years, has talked about the gathering storm of a nuclear Iran for decades. Now, he mostly has support among all political factions in Israel. It's interesting. There, as you see right now in the streets of Israel, fierce debate, but on a nuclear Iran and that prospect, most, except maybe the extreme fringes in Israel, they're on the same page there, saying, hey, that's a non-starter. Never again means never again, and we will do something about that. That's good to know on one hand, but on the other hand, folks, I have to say, Israel right now is presenting the image of disunity right now. Now, a kingdom divided, a house divided itself against itself cannot stand, as Jesus said. Any nation that shows that kind of division, disunity, and acrimony, it's never good for that nation. And I see it right now in the United States. I'm living it. I'm feeling it in my country, which I love. But Israel, for Israel to be divided, let's be honest, folks, it's even more dangerous. The stakes are high in every nation around the world, but the stakes might be a little bit higher in Israel in that it is surrounded by enemies who seek to destroy it and wipe it off the map. So you would much prefer to see a united front in Israel among the people of Israel in dealing with these external threats. And right now, that's not the image the world's getting. And I believe the likes of Hezbollah are getting encouraged, which brings us to our next story today we want to hit on. And hey, when you think about the Second Temple, folks, if you do your research there, and I encourage you to read Josephus, the Jewish historian who flipped and went and worked for the Romans. But the works of Josephus are invaluable extra biblical sources about Jesus, about the Jewish-Roman wars. Fascinating. Strongly recommend that you read Josephus. But he talks about the collapse of the Second Temple in AD 70. The Romans, not barbarians, the Romans were anti-barbarian, fighting the barbarians, but the Romans were at the gates. I tried to do a little play on words there. The Romans were at the gates. And not that the Romans weren't barbarous, by the way, but strangely enough, they looked down on the barbarians from Germania and elsewhere, and the Jews, needless to say. But I digress again. The Romans were at the gates. They were literally at the walls of the temple. And inside, on the Temple Mount, three different Jewish factions were engaged in a civil war and killing each other as the Romans were there at the foot of the temple. They couldn't unite and face the common external threat. And folks, today, look, Israel has an even more severe external threat in that Iran is driving for the kind of weapons that will wipe you off the map, will wipe any nation off the map, nuclear weapons. The Romans leveled the temple, they leveled most of Jerusalem, but they couldn't turn the country, the land of Israel, into charred earth. They tried, but they couldn't completely wipe out every vestige of civilization in the land of Israel or every Jew. Iran seeks to do that, and they're seeking to employ the weapons that could do exactly that. So I'm saying the stakes are much higher in 2023 than they were in AD 70. And man, they were high then, believe me. But that's where we're at right now. That's the state of play, which means Israel, let's get it together. The people of Israel need to get it together and get on the same page somehow. I don't know how they do it, and hey, if you're in disagreement, it's a free and open society. You're going to protest. You're going to debate it. That's great. But man, oh man, those external threats, whether it's Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Assad regime, they're taking notes and they're watching and they're getting bolder and they're saying, hey, perhaps the Zionist entity is ripe for the picking right now. They're at each other's throats while we're at the doorstep. I'll give you a good example. Hezbollah, we talked about last week that attempted bombing at Megiddo Junction in northern Israel. Thankfully, this wasn't a massive terror attack where dozens were killed or injured. That was certainly the intent. That unfortunate young guy was injured. Pray for him again, as I mentioned at the top. But Hezbollah had deadly intent here, folks. It looks like they had planned a mass casualty incident, no doubt. That Megiddo Junction is heavily trafficked. I've been there. Now, why last week, after Hezbollah has been mostly silent for the better part of 17 years, for the most part? They've carried out attacks against Israeli interests abroad, but inside Israel proper, Hezbollah hasn't tried anything like they did in the summer of 2006, where they kidnapped 2 Israeli soldiers along the Israel-Lebanon border, which precipitated the Second Lebanon War, Israel and Hezbollah going toe-to-toe for over a month in July and August 2006. In the 17 years since then, I don't want to say Hezbollah has laid low. They've built up their arsenal to very dangerous proportions, some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel. As we showed you on yesterday's newscast, they developed a tunnel network, a terror tunnel network along the Israel-Lebanon border. And look, thousands of Hezbollah operatives have fought in Syria over the past decade plus. They are battle-hardened and battle-tested. So Hezbollah has been sitting around doing nothing, needless to say, and yet they have held their fire for the better part of 17 years. No doubt on the orders of their Iranian masters. If Iran seeks to activate Hezbollah, Hezbollah will be activated. Iran has largely held Hezbollah in reserve as they anticipate a greater battle to come. Here on the newscast, we've called it the Great Northern War, which is coming. But an escalation, right? Last week, a large explosive device planted in northern Israel in a civilian area by what appears to be a Hezbollah operative who now, and in case you missed yesterday's newscast, check it out here in our archives on the homepage. And again, give us a subscribe. We'd love to have you here with us. Also, hey, follow us on Instagram. Now that I'm thinking about it, Instagram, Eric.Stakelbeck. We're putting some original content there too, which I think you'll like. Eric.Stakelbeck, trying to do daily updates now on Instagram. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, but a real focus on Instagram now, in addition to YouTube, of course, and the TBN program. But yesterday we talked about the entry point for this presumed Hezbollah operative. At first, many were saying, did he come through a tunnel? Folks, those tunnels have been shut down. The ones we know of. Israel, I believe, destroyed 5 or 6 of them completely. They kept the one tunnel, which I've been inside of with the IDF. They kept that tunnel open basically as a message to the world. This is what we're dealing with. But there was some speculation. Wow, did Hezbollah have another tunnel that they, built, constructed that the IDF did not uncover? That doesn't appear to be the case. According to the IDF, he apparently entered Israel from Lebanon using a ladder. Now, folks, I don't mean to laugh, but with all the technology today, that seems a rather rudimentary way to bust the border, especially because that is a heavily fortified border. I've been there many times, the Israel-Lebanon border, but apparently this terrorist crossed using a ladder. We're waiting for more details there. I know an investigation is ongoing by the Israel Defense Forces, but on his way back after he planted the bomb, on his way back, he was apprehended and he was killed by Israeli security forces. So there you have it. But here's what Nasrallah said. In terms of the bad guys being emboldened by the unrest they see in Israel domestically right now, here we go, folks. From the Times of Israel, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah, who, by the way, since that second Lebanon war in 2006, the past 17 years, has been literally living underground, moving from house to house, place to place every day. He's in constant fear for his life and constant fear that he'll be taken out, assassinated by Israel. So if that war accomplished anything, and it did accomplish some good things. I mean, Hezbollah was weakened. It sent a message to Hezbollah. One thing it certainly accomplished was keeping Nasrallah on edge and then some. But Hezbollah terror chief, this is from the Times of Israel. I'm looking down because I'm just reading this right off my phone. Hassan Nasrallah on Wednesday broke his group's silence on a blast on a highway in northern Israel last week, which was carried out by a man who infiltrated from Lebanon. In a televised speech, and in these underground bunkers, Nasrallah apparently has the capabilities to do this. In a televised speech, Nasrallah said the terror group would not be commenting on the bombing at the Megiddo Junction, which is suspected to have been orchestrated by Hezbollah. Instead, he said the attack, quote, confused Israel, and that, quote, our silence, Hezbollah's silence, is part of the political, media, military, and psychological battle with the enemy. We are not required to comment on every incident, he said. Nasrallah added that any Zionist attack on Lebanon, military or security, in any region and against any person in Lebanon, whether he is Lebanese or Palestinian, will be met with a swift response from, quote, the resistance, as Hezbollah and Iran and Hamas call themselves, that Iranian axis. So Hezbollah is saying, we're not going to comment on it, but folks, read between the lines. He likes to, or he thinks he's in Israel's heads right now. They're confused. It's psychological warfare, and he's in Israel's heads right now. So he thinks. But would he have tried? I leave you with this question. Two questions. Number one, will Israel retaliate? Yes, they killed the terrorist, but this would have been a mass casualty event. And thank God, by miracle of God, it wasn't, this bombing. Does Israel feel a need to retaliate in some way? And I said yesterday, perhaps they do retaliate in Syria, where, again, several Hezbollah operatives are known to operate, building up that Iranian weapons stash in Syria. So we shall see if Israel does retaliate in some way. You would think, as much as Nasrallah thinks he's being slick and playing a psychological game, Israel's much better at psychological warfare. And you would think that Israel, if and when retaliation comes, it will not be telegraphed. It will come at a time when Hezbollah knows not. Let's say that. So, but we are watching that closely to see what comes next there. And folks, look, talk about a tinderbox, the Israel-Lebanon border. One false move by Hezbollah could spark a major war there when Israel feels compelled, for deterrence sake, to respond in a very forceful way. So we shall see. But do you think that the timing of this, I'd like to hear in the comments, and we're going to get to Q&A in about 3 minutes. So send those questions along. But do you think the timing of this attempted bombing was not coincidental. Do you think that Nasrallah saw the unrest inside of Israel and it encouraged him and emboldened him? And also, he made comments, I believe, a week or two ago about this very topic, saying, hey, look, they're a mess inside of Israel. They're ripe for the pickings. It's only a matter of time, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm not saying, look, Israel's a free and open society. Hey, people are free to protest. If you don't like something, you can protest. Hey, all good. But there comes a point where when you have members of Israel's reserves and the military reservists reportedly considering not reporting for duty, that's what I'm talking about, folks. That's when it gets kind of dangerous. Because when it comes to, hey, you can squabble politically and disagree over laws and legislation all day long. It's a free country. But Israel's defense and security, that's an area where Israelis always have come together to unite against the external threats. So I just hope and pray that Israel, under the current circumstances, does that again. I'm confident they will. I'm confident most Israelis understand the stakes and how high they are. But it is troubling right now to see Israelis literally at each other's throats. And look, 5 elections in 4 years, as much as Israel is thriving, it seems like it gives off the impression it's kind of a mess politically. And that's not the right impression to send to your enemies, because they say, hey, they're divided. This is the time where we can make a move. And I think some of that was at play here with Nasrallah probing last week and Hezbollah probing under the orders, no doubt, of Iran, who ordered the probing, who's saying, hey, they're so distracted right now. Let's see what we can get away with. Let's see how they respond. So a dangerous time, folks, a very dangerous time. We shall see how this all pans out. In the meantime, I did mention Syria real quick before we get to the questions. I want to give you an update there. Aleppo International Airport in northern Syria, once again, it appears, is shut down after Israeli airstrikes last night. Now, Nasrallah says he's not going to comment. Well, Israel's MO, as you well know if you watch the newscast, is they rarely comment on any actions by the Israel Defense Forces, in particular in Syria. And they didn't this time, but according to Syrian state media sources, missiles were fired from over the Mediterranean Sea, most likely from Israel, targeting Aleppo International Airport and an Iranian munitions depot around the airport. And who knows, folks, look, cargo planes have been flowing into Aleppo International Airport over the past month and a half, delivering aid to needy Syrians who were affected by that earthquake, remember, which slammed not only Turkey, but really, really hit northwestern Syria hard as well. Thousands died there too, in addition to the tens of thousands in Turkey. So Aleppo International Airport has been kind of the natural transit point for aid to flow in from around the world to the people of Syria. And I assume some of that's going over the border into Turkey as well. But Iran has also been sending cargo planes to Syria under the guise of earthquake aid. But folks, it's not earthquake aid according to Israel, on those Iranian cargo planes. Israel warned Iran about this about a month ago. Iran apparently did not heed the warning, and they continue to push. That's why you had these airstrikes at Aleppo airport last week and yesterday. So what is Iran trying to bring into Syria? Precision-guided missile parts? That's the constant and persistent question, and that's the reason that Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria against Iran and Hezbollah over the past decade plus. So the Syria story, and what does that lead to? Is that part of the groundwork being laid for the Great Northern War? Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the situation in Syria. Look, Israel's north and its northeast borders, Lebanon and Syria. Where is this heading? I believe it's heading to a larger confrontation. Again, I've called it the Great Northern War. Iran and its proxies there to the north, led by Hezbollah, coming against Israel. But others will throw their hats in the ring. Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Perhaps the Houthis in Yemen start stirring to the far south of Israel. The Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, all Iranian proxies, all directed from the Iranian regime in Tehran. But they surround Israel with what we've called the Ring of Fire. Thankfully, I've been on live fire drills with the Israel Defense Forces over the years, folks. They're drilling constantly for this, preparing constantly for this inevitable showdown, which again will mainly be in the north, but which will include certainly the terror forces in Gaza as well. Israel is aware, Israel's leadership, Israeli Defense Forces officials, they're aware of what is eventually coming down the pike. It's inevitable, folks, because it's unsustainable to have Hezbollah perched on your northern doorstep, an entity committed to your destruction with 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of your tiny nation, which, a reminder, is the size of the state of New Jersey. That's how large, quote unquote, the state of Israel is. Secondly, also unsustainable, a nation that's committed to your destruction, Iran, on your northeastern doorstep in Syria, trying to transit precision-guided missiles at your doorstep, which do exactly what their name says. They're designed to hit a target with greater accuracy and greater precision. All red lines for Israel, all potentially existential threats, all non-starters. You do the math. So it's coming. The question is not if, but when. And I'm not being a doomsayer, and I'm just telling it like it is, folks. We live in times where common sense is not so common, sadly, but I think it's common sense to observe the state of play to Israel's north and say, yeah, eventually that thing is going to explode, pun intended. So again, you do the math. This is not brain surgery. It's obvious what is eventually coming down the pike. Okay, let's get to questions. And again, a shout out to everyone watching right now. This is great. Got thousands of people with us, people from around the world. We've got some great questions lined up here, I know. And let's dig into it for the remainder of this live stream. Okay. What do we have? My trusty producer, Daniel, says we are a little low on the questions today. Folks, what gives? Send along some questions. Some good ones here. I have two quick ones that I'll get out of the way right now. They're both good. Hey, this is from P, lowercase, just P. Hey, Eric, can you do a segment on Mount Sinai in Arabia where God came down and gave the law? Been there, done that. I haven't been to Saudi Arabia, but I did the segment, P, and I interviewed someone who had been there on the ground at Mount Sinai, the place that's believed is Mount Sinai in Arabia. You can find it, I think, actually, on our homepage here on the channel. It's under our most popular videos. I think it's titled, Is This the Real Mount Sinai, in the thumbnail. Look for that under our most popular videos. You can do an internet search, Watchman Sinai, and you will find it. We did do a segment, and my hope is to get to Saudi Arabia eventually and go in person to that site. Okay, the other thing I want to get out of the way, and I don't say that in a dismissive way, but just some house cleaning here, housekeeping, I should say, and I need some house cleaning, spring cleaning in my house as well. Jordan Bradley asks, Eric, are chances good for us to see some new programming with you and Danny the Digger? Why, yes, there is, Jordan. I've got a Danny the Digger backlog, some great stuff I have filmed with him recently for the Watchmen that we're going to start releasing, and starting this Thursday, that's tomorrow night, on TBN, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, the Watchmen TV show. The re-air is Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That's March 23rd, March 24th. New episode featuring Danny the Digger, and I believe we'll likely get that segment up either this weekend or next weekend on YouTube. But in the meantime, catch it first on the TV show, on the Watchmen TV show. Okay, two good questions there. Good to get you guys up to date with some Watchmen programming there. Randall Mitchell asks, Eric, do you think the deeper Putin gets that he will almost have to use tactical nukes as a last resort to try and save himself? Randall, I think it's a great question. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. I've said this before. When Putin and his inner circle, it's not saber rattling when they threaten to use nuclear weapons. I believe if Putin feels his back is completely against the wall, what does that mean? Vladimir Putin with his back against the wall. That means it looks like Russia is on the brink of a major disaster in Ukraine, that there's no way Russia can get out of that conflict saving face in any way. It's going to end in complete disaster for Russian forces. Russia's going to be forced to withdraw. Putin knows that if that happens, or if there's even a hint that that's going to happen, he's either out of power and in exile, or he's dead. He's a dead man. That neither of those options are beyond the realm of possibility either. He knows that. He knows he's probably short for this world, or at least short for the presidency in Russia, if it just ends in a massive debacle. Folks, reportedly, at least 100,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the past 13 months in Ukraine. That's insane. So already this has not gone well. It's not gone the way he planned. It's isolated him and Russia on the world stage. And I feel for the Russian people, most of whom want no parts of this. But needless to say, if he feels his back is against the wall, which may mean he loses his life, would he? Would he resort to tactical battlefield nuclear weapons in Ukraine? I don't think anyone out there right now watching can say he would never do that. Some may, who are short-sighted. It's just bluster. He won't really do it. It's just empty threats and saber rattling. Folks, I wouldn't be so sure. And I said this last week on the live stream. When I hear Western leaders saying, we are going to defeat Russia in Ukraine, the utter defeat of Vladimir Putin and Russian forces in Ukraine is the end game here. We're going to continue to pour billions and billions into Ukraine, weapons, etc. I think it's short-sighted in that, do you really think, as Randall asks in his great question, do you really think Putin's just going to accept defeat and pack up his bags and go home and go back to Russia and accept a defeat in Ukraine? There's no way. He's got way too much. He's all in. He's fully invested in this thing. His life literally may be riding on this. Do you think he's just going to accept defeat? Isn't it much more likely that he throws everything, if he feels that moment is imminent of defeat, that he throws everything into the kitchen sink at Ukraine? In observing his actions, his statements, I think that would certainly be the case. And I think it's naive for anyone to think that he's just going to accept a defeat and go home. Folks, what I'm saying is this, last thing I'll say on this, the situation in Ukraine will get a whole lot worse before it gets better. And I'm sad to say that. I pray for the people there. It's a horrible situation. I'm praying every day for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia as well, who don't want to be involved in this and Putin's dictatorship. But I also have to be realistic. This guy's not going to go down without swinging in a major way. Let's be realistic. And for Western leaders to think anything different shows their naivete. Wow. Okay. Here we go. What do we have here? Okay, now people are sending questions. There you go. Okay, good stuff, guys. Let's see. Question from Shenandoah. Shenandoah. Do you think the relationship that is going on between Russia and China could lead to the 3.5 years of peace between Iran, Turkey, Israel, and Russia? Okay, Shenandoah, I think you're referring to the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period. That's an interesting question. I guess the big question is, does the war of Gog and Magog, in which Turkey, Iran, and Russia are united, in my view, again, they come against Israel, does that happen before the 7-year tribulation? Or does it happen during the 7-year tribulation, perhaps at the midway point of the tribulation, when all hell really literally breaks loose at that midpoint? That's a good question. I'm not dogmatic on that. I'm not going to say, no, absolutely, the war of Gog and Magog happens before the tribulation, or no, it happens during the tribulation, and that's that. I'm not sure when exactly that happens, but to your question, I think that would impact your question. Now, it becomes a moot point if the war of Gog and Magog occurs before those 3.5 years of false peace, and Iran and Turkey and Russia are just weakened beyond comprehension to the point where they are no longer players in a major way on the world stage. As God Almighty, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, intervenes on behalf of his people and his land, and literally destroys that Gog-Magog invasion force. So I think a lot of that, Shenandoah, might depend on the timing. And by the way, issues like this, certain prophetic issues, when does the war of Gog and Magog happen? Before the tribulation or after or during the tribulation, etc.? These aren't salvation issues. We can debate about these in a friendly way, folks. We all believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Your salvation is not impacted on on the timeline of the Gog-Magog war. Let me just say that, because sometimes people get so heated, including brothers and sisters in Christ, and they start insulting other people who don't agree with them. So let's not do that. But I'm humble enough, I hope, to admit I don't quite know if it'll be before the tribulation or during the tribulation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Only God knows, I think, at the end of the day, when it comes to anything. But on that, I'm not quite sure when it will come on the timeline. But I do have an inkling that we're inching closer as the chess pieces move on the board, as Iran, Turkey, and Russia all have a presence already in Syria, at Israel's northern doorstep, at the border of the mountains of Israel. So, interesting times. Okay, let's see what else we have. Paul Evelyn Hoffman asks, a lot of people ask this in comments, what is the meaning of your landmark closing, I like that, your landmark closing statement, never hold your peace? Isaiah 62:6. I'm not going to say anything else about it, Paul Evelyn Hoffman, because I want you all to pick your Bibles up or look it up on your phone in the very least. Isaiah 62:6. Look at it, read it, and then you will know. It will make perfect sense to you. Okay. Let's see. Time for a few more questions here. Kyle Driscoll asks, hi, Eric, he says, hi, Eric, what is your opinion on Saudi Arabia's renewed relations with Iran, and will Saudi Arabia play a role in the inevitable conflict? Kyle, I've talked about this a bunch. Check it out in our archives. I feel like the Saudis were kind of forced into the arms of Iran. Because of a weak United States, I don't think that Saudi Arabia will align with Iran. This is, in the Saudis' view, this is more of a non-aggression pact. And will Saudi play a role in the inevitable conflict? Perhaps you mean the war of Gog and Magog. I do believe they will play a role, not an active role. The Bible or the book of Ezekiel talks about the merchants of Tarshish, but Sheba and Dedan would be Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula. Tarshish is another segment there, but Sheba and Dedan protest and say, why are you doing this to that Gog-Magog invasion force? I believe the Saudis could very well be numbered among those folks, Sheba and Dedan. Okay, one more question. One more for you. Let's see. Oh, man. You guys have sent along some good questions. Darn. Let's see. Melissa Resnick. We'll end with this, Melissa. Do you believe the Psalm 83 war has occurred? Those players seem to be turning their weapons towards Israel as we approach Pesach, Passover. Another one. There's various takes on this. Our good friend Bill Salas was on the show recently, and he's the man on Psalm 83. I encourage you to check Bill Salas out, prophecydepot.com, all his writings about Psalm 83. 1967, there's a part of me as I look at it that says 1967 may very well have been the fulfillment of Psalm 83. And one reason I say that is some of the players that aligned together, including the Saudis and Egypt, apparently are aligning with the Iranian axis. That seems unlikely right now. Yes, the Saudis have what I'm calling a non-aggression pact with Iran. That doesn't mean all of a sudden they're going to align with Iran. And the same with Egypt and Jordan and some of the other nations that seem to be named in Psalm 83. So I wouldn't count it out in terms of being a future prophetic event. It certainly seems, as Bill Salas has said, that it could be the kind of event that precedes the Gog-Magog invasion for a lot of reasons. But I also wouldn't discount that perhaps it has been fulfilled in 1967 with the Six-Day War. Others believe it's just a prophetic prayer. So again, I think we need to be humble enough on certain tricky things like Psalm 83, fulfilled or not, or Gog Magog war, before or during the tribulation. I think we need to be humble enough to say, this is what I'm leaning towards, but I don't quite know. And I think that's okay. And we have great prophecy teachers teaching on these things as well. So this was great being with you all today. Until tomorrow's newscast, thanks again for joining us. God bless you. And remember, Isaiah 62:6, check it out. Never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching.